state. Everyday people like you tell their stories about why they have to move out of the state even though they don't want to. Experts and policymakers also give insights about what's happening behind the scenes. Together, we get to the root cause of this exodus. Go to leavingcalifornia.com to view the first 15 minutes of the film for free. By watching Leaving California, you can be part of the solution. Again, go to leavingcalifornia.com.
All of the environmentally clean gas energy like solar and wind, but they're not adding anything to power plants or anything like that. I'm glad Newsom was smart enough to at least not shut down that nuclear plant that they were getting ready to shut down. But all of that adds to the cost of living here because you've got unreliable energy, you've got expensive energy, and then again, every year the gas taxes go up in California, and they don't want that to stop.
So it seems like we want to be cleaner and cleaner and cleaner and cleaner, and the cost is going up with it for the average resident.
Yeah, and here's the problem with that. They are managing by mandates. They're not managing by technology. If they would just let technology catch up, I guarantee you that technology would allow for things like to phase out fossil fuels at some point. I don't know when that is. But that's the most efficient way to get places right now. Do you know how much a Tesla battery weighs on a car?
How much?
1,000 pounds. 1,000 pounds. And if you're at the end of the battery life, it still weighs 1,000 pounds. It weighs about 80 pounds for a tank of gas. 80 pounds. So you have to overcome that weight difference alone when you're driving a battery-powered car versus a fuel-powered car. And then there is nothing more powerful other than nuclear than a gallon of gasoline or fossil fuels. So you've got all of that energy in a full tank of gas versus a 1,000-pound Tesla battery. And think about it this way, too. You have the mildest climate in the United States here in California. My son, who born and raised in California, decided to go to college at the University of North Dakota. For 6 months of the year, it doesn't get above 40 degrees. For the month of January, typically it doesn't get above 0. Is he going to be driving a Tesla? Is he going to be warming his car up in the morning with a Tesla battery and powering his car in a blizzard? No, it doesn't. Technology's not there yet. If we just let people like Elon Musk and all these other people who are working on these alternatives, let them do their work without mandating all of these ending dates. Then you'll have a progression that makes sense, and technology will help us get out of this, dependence on fossil fuels. I don't know why they have such a problem with fossil fuels, other than, of course, they believe it's ruining the planet. But the other side of it is 1/4 of the planet burns dung for energy. Dung. And we're complaining about fossil fuels. China builds a new coal-fired power plant every week. They're exempt. China and India are exempt from all of these Kyoto Treaty mandates. Yet here in California, they're eliminating the middle class because they can't afford to pay the bills anymore, and they're leaving. And the cost of living is going through the roof, and they have a less reliable energy grid when they don't have to do it that way. They could just let technology get us through this process.
Have you thought?
The federal agency says the bulb switch will save consumers around $3 billion per year.
And cost more.
Carbon emissions. But the Residential Energy Consumption Survey says fewer than half of households reported using mostly or exclusively LED bulbs. More higher-income households used LEDs compared to those of lower income. The Energy Department has reversed a Trump-era rule protecting incandescent bulbs and consumer choice of lighting options. Consumer groups have also said the perceived climate benefits are, quote, speculative, assumption-driven, and prone to bias in the hands of agencies with a regulatory agenda.
Since April 2021. Postings grew in sectors like healthcare and state and local government, but fell in education, transportation, warehousing, utilities, and the federal government. The drop is in line with tight labor market conditions, despite hefty interest rate increases from the Fed to dampen demand.
Where's all these jobs Joe Biden created?
Is retiring, but do you know who it is? Baby boomers and millennials get a lot of attention in the press, but you don't often hear about Generation X. Here to discuss is NTD Business's Don Ma. Don, I guess that's why they call Generation X the forgotten generation.
Yeah, well, Chris, the latest survey from the National Institute for Retirement Security pointed out that Generation X, so we're talking about ages 41 to 56, they're not ready for retirement according to this survey, this report. You know, some of them only have a few $1,000s saved up for retirement, and you know they're not young right now.
Yeah, and we're hearing that they have, on average, about $40,000 in retirement savings saved up. That's not much.
Yeah, and some of them have $0 saved up. Some of them have $1 saved up. You know, it's looking, you know, grim for some of these people.
And I'm also hearing that they're the first generation to be born after the nation switched from the pension plan type retirement system to the 401k retirement system.
Yeah, so we have to point out that this group of people is significant to relation to the population of the U.S. We're talking about nearly 64 million people, around 20% of the entire population in the U.S. So it's really important to think about retirement when you're younger rather than older. And earlier I spoke to a financial advisor, Lawrence Sprung, to get some professional tips. He's from Midland Financial. Maybe we can take a look at that interview. So the latest report from the National Institute on Retirement Security is it shows that Gen X is facing a dismal retirement outlook. I found that the bottom half of earners have only a few $1,000s saved for retirement. So we're talking about people between 41 and 56. So my question to you is, let's just take the middle number here. If you're 48 years old, is it too late to start saving aggressively for retirement?
So Don, I'm right in this Gen X phase here, and I'm exactly that number. I'm 48. So, it's a challenge, right? The benefit is starting early. So the earlier you get started, the better. But I think the bottom line is, for those that might find themselves behind the eight ball, so to speak, it is time for them to figure out their way and figure out a way to start putting more towards their retirement, because I think what we're seeing now is really a result of many of the changes that have taken place over the last couple of decades, as far as the shift from defined, benefit plans to now defined contribution plans, where we're going to be responsible for our own retirement. So if you're not there yet and you're not above the median and you're well below, it's time to really get started in a big way.
Okay, so here's another question. Whatever your salary is now, is it realistic to assume that you only need half of it when you retire? That means whatever your living standard is now, you're going to have to reduce that by half. What do you think?
I don't know that that's a realistic expectation. Many a times the families that we're working with, we look at things on the other side of the equation, because the salary, the income in a household, it may be a single, it may be a joint. More importantly, you want to look at the expenses. What are the expenses looking like for the family? And many times we're seeing instances where the need is closer to 80% of what their current expenses are going to continue into retirement. And in some areas of the country where living expenses may be higher, it's closer to 90 to 100%. A lot of folks who are in the higher living expenses area, where it's a higher cost of living, they may not see a significant drop off in retirement, assuming they keep their situation status quo. So we typically look at that 80% number at a minimum. I think 50% you're shooting on the low side.
How many percent should you be putting aside from your salary for retirement as a rule of thumb?
As much as you can. So, it comes down to as much as you possibly can. Obviously, when you're younger, you have the ability to potentially put in less because you have the time value of money working on your side and having that grow through compound interest. I think that number that you're looking at, and we talk to folks all the time about that 10% magic number. If you could save 10% of your earnings every year, especially as a young person, that should put you in a pretty good position over the long haul. Now, depending on how much you have saved at this point and how old you are, you may need to look to, increase that number and that percentage, because if you're sitting around and you're 48, 49, 50 years old and you are below that median and you're at the lower end, and your expenses are relatively high, you may have to put in significantly more than that 10% number to get you back on track.
All right, thank you so much, Lawrence, today for your insight.
Working here in the United States.
Now, tell us about your own personal experience as a teen farmer and just the conditions that these young migrant employees will face.
Well, as you know, Chris, you know me. I was a migrant farm worker as a child. These are difficult conditions. They're deplorable, frankly. They were back in the day. And while things have gotten a bit better, it is unimaginably difficult work. It is sun up to sundown. It's physical labor. You're out in the elements all day long. You're out in the heat. You're out in the cold all day long. In my personal circumstance, our home was a 14 by 24 foot structure with no internal walls. We didn't have indoor plumbing. We didn't have electricity. And myself and my mother and 9 siblings lived there. It was very difficult. And while, again, conditions have gotten better, it is unimaginable to the average American what these immigrant laborers have to do.
And what about the companies involved here? What can the business community do to, put pressure or just ensure this kind of thing doesn't get out of control?
Well, at the United States Hispanic Business Council, we sympathize with those businesses and those industries that are suffering from labor shortages. But undeniably, child labor is wrong. It is undeniably evil. And at the USHBC, we believe in commerce, but we believe in commerce with a conscience. Listen, we are America. We can do better. And so we need to work together to...
Often because they have a criminal background. And these are people coming across the border in so many different ways, but illegal ways. They're called by Border Patrol and authorities gotaways, and that's a term that I really think we want this movie to become a normal term across the country that people are familiar with.
Well, that sounds important because we hear a lot of narratives that kind of mix the whole pool of people together. We hear about migrants, we hear about legal immigrants, then we hear about illegal immigrants. So how are the gotaways different from the other groups?
So if you think about people who are coming across the border, and they're coming in mass numbers, and they're very easy to see, and the media will show big groups of people coming to the border. Border Patrol is absolutely overwhelmed by the number of these people coming through. The Biden administration has been encouraging people to come through. But what is happening while we're looking at them is that there's criminals and plenty of other people that have heard that the border's open. And they are coming through because they would not be able to get legal status within this country. So the big groups of migrants to America, they usually have some sort of paperwork or something to prove that in some way they could get immigration status at some point. Some of them will be rejected, others will come through. But those crossing illegally, it's almost certain that they would not get legal status in the US, and that's why they're coming through illegally. But that's a massive population of people now living in the US that we haven't been talking about.
Well, this is important too, because I did my own investigation of the border, and most of what I focused on was the manipulation of the migrant system. People are applying for amnesty, and they're discarding their IDs, and they're basically just being trafficked in. When we talk about the buses and the airplanes and just busing and flying people over the country and the NGO involvement, that's one type.
those are the quote-unquote migrants. And yeah, the State Department is coordinating with the UN on that whole system. But, you know, one thing I did hear when I was at the border, too, is that there are people who don't go through that system, and usually there's a reason why they try to avoid it. So, you know, who are these people? Like, what were you finding about them?
So, in this movie, Gotaways, The Hidden Border Crisis, we actually take you to the border in a way that just hasn't been done, because the investigation was a 2-year investigation. The director, Charlotte Cuthbertson, who I worked with in Texas there, she's been stationed on the border for 2 years, and she's been up close and personal, riding in the cars with the sheriffs while they're arresting human smugglers and criminals. And it's just there's so much action going on in the border there every single day. From these arrests are happening anywhere from 5 a.m. in the morning to 2 a.m. again the next morning, and they're happening constantly. And a lot of these people have criminal records. And something that really shocked me was the number of Americans that are traveling from all across the country. Some fly in, some drive in, they borrow or rent cars or steal cars, and they are coming in and they are taking illegal immigrants across the border. They are participating in human smuggling to get them over the border. But those people may not be aware that quite often they're carrying criminals. And so when these people are arrested, very often the sheriffs and deputy sheriffs there are finding that there are people with criminal records being brought in who are pretending to be just regular immigrants, but they're not. They really are crossing illegally and often have a criminal background. And so many Americans, really shockingly, are participating in this, thinking they can make a few quick bucks, but they're getting caught, and that's what you see up close and personal in this movie.
Really important stuff. And again, the part that people aren't being shown usually. Kay, where can people see the documentary? When can they watch it?
It is being released on Friday, the 28th of July, and that's tomorrow. Yeah. Yep, tomorrow. And go to gotawaysfilm.com to watch it, gotawaysfilm.com, and it's made by Epoch TV, so you can check it out there.
Okay. Democrats enough to make much of a difference at the polls. For Republicans, look, they already know about Hunter Biden. They have their general opinions already set. For Democrats, well, it would just look like Republicans using their powers in Congress to go after Biden. That's the way the media would frame it. But for Republicans, a potential impeachment may actually not be about impeaching Biden at all. McCarthy actually suggested this in the same interview. Watch.
This is rising to the level of impeachment inquiry, which provides Congress the strongest power to get the rest of the knowledge and information needed.
In other words, it sounds like Republicans are less interested in impeaching Biden just for the sake of politics. The impeached president label. For them, it sounds more like they want to impeach Biden for the sake of getting more evidence into the developing criminal investigation. And this is important. For them, there is the belief that the Department of Justice may be in on it. And if that's the case, any real investigation would need to go through Congress and bypass the DOJ. Criminal inquiry at the DOJ, well, look, this is actually in line with what Speaker McCarthy has been saying for a while. In April last year, in fact, he dismissed calls from the GOP lawmakers to impeach Biden. Why?
Look, one thing we learned that the Democrats did is they used impeachment for political reasons. We believe in the rule of law. We're not going to pick and choose just because somebody has power. We're going to uphold the law. America has been through too much with people playing politics with the concept of impeachment. But if it rises to that level, we would have the law determine that.
Now, the exception to this was if someone breaks the law. McCarthy said in that case, Republicans would consider impeachment. If there was a vote for impeachment, there is the slight possibility, notably, that Democrats would vote with Republicans to remove Biden from office. Remember, there have been rumors for quite a while now that many Democrats may want President Biden out of office. They can make way for candidates who could maybe poll better within the party. But in my personal opinion, it's unlikely they're going to do this. I think many Democrats actually do want Biden out. I think many of them would like to see someone more on their side, I'd say. such as California Governor Gavin Newsom, taking the steering wheel. Some even want Michelle Obama, which would mean Barack Obama could technically hit the campaign trail again and likely even play a role in the administration as the first man. But pushing Biden out at this point would also push the DNC into very dangerous territory. Because right now, well, President Biden has incumbency. He doesn't have to join any primary elections. He doesn't have to debate anybody. He has the Democrat nomination regardless of who campaigns against him among the Democrats. If he were pushed out, however, then you'd have a primary election. And part of that primary election would include someone the party itself appears to utterly despise, yet who many Democrat voters seem to generally like, and that is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Look, the establishment media has been framing RFK Jr. as a dangerous conspiracy theorist. They say he's anti-vax. Some have even called him a false flag for the far right. Now, they try to paint him like a secret Republican trying to subvert the Democrat Party. And Democrat leaders appear to equally dislike him. Congressional Democrats, in fact, even tried blocking him last week from testifying at a hearing on government censorship. This is despite the fact that a recent Harvard-Harris poll gave him a higher favorability rating and a lower unfavorable rating among registered voters than any other candidate. It suggests he could bring in moderate Democrats and even possibly bridge party lines, although it's questionable whether the far left would be on board. So why would the Democrats not want potentially the only candidate who could beat Trump? Well, probably because RFK Jr. goes against the interests of the political establishment. He's against the military-industrial complex. He's against Big Pharma. He looks to upend some of the key financial pillars in Washington. And he ironically represents a lot of the policies that the Democrat Party and many Democrat voters used to stand by. In other words, he represents a similar threat to change the Democrat establishment. And really the same type that Trump presented to the Republican establishment. He could change the DNC. And if he decided to run as a third-party candidate, he could potentially bring down the party itself. Now, for Democrats, the saving grace from that potential future is a continued future with President Biden. And through all the controversies coming up, through the potential impeachment and investigations that are probably going to come along with it, well, they're riding with Biden for the long haul.
Impaired the federal government from functioning. Isn't that literally the Republican Party platform to reduce the ability of the federal government from functioning? And then they say it's a crime to ask Pence not to certify? I wonder if Pence would agree that that was a crime. Apparently, the campaign managers told the defendant, Donald Trump, he had a 5 to 10% chance of winning these challenges, but he still fought on. The indictment said, how dare he? With 5 to 10% chance, I wonder what the guys in Vegas would say. You now have suspicious activity in Philadelphia, Detroit, and Arizona and Nevada. They're going to have to litigate suspicious election activity in all of those states. They're going to be presenting evidence. The defense is going to be presenting evidence. And then the prosecution is going to have to knock that down. We're going to relitigate all of these deep blue Democrat districts over the entire country in court in 2024 in an election year. That's really, do you think that's healthy for the country, Jonathan Turley? And do you think that's a road that Democrats want to go down to defend the integrity of Philadelphia's election security? And then they're saying, Trump said the voting machines weren't secure. Again, we're going back to voting machines at trial in court in an election year. We're going to bring in voting machine executives who explain everything's fine, and then they're up on cross-examination. We're going to go through that again, Jonathan Turley. And then lastly, they're saying lying about an election is illegal. Well, then Hillary, lock her up.
John Kerry, too.